Good morning and welcome to Lundy Guillemots 2019. My name is Grant Sherman. I had the good fortune to live and work on Lundy for over 13 years. I spent a lot of that time filming the guillemots on the west coast of Lundy, particularly this ledge at St Philip's Stone, just between Jenny's Cove and Three Quarter Wall. I first found this ledge in 2008, and I've been trying to trace the lives of these 18 pairs of guillemots ever since, particularly filming them when they're raising their chicks, seeing how many times they feed their chicks, seeing how many chicks are produced on the ledge. Seabird work can be quite dangerous. You're working on cliffs in exposed situations. Those of you that visit Lundy at any time will know it can be quite windy on occasions. I have two different locations where I can film this ledge. One is low down, about 100 to 90 metres away from the guillemots, but that involves going down the sidelands. It's not something I like doing when it's windy. The other location is up at the top of the island, about 300 metres away from the ledge, which involves filming it with a big lens. When it's windy, you can see those problems you get. So this was filmed huddled behind a granite outcrop just near the Wendy Ann Mitchell Memorial. If any of you do the letterboxes, you'll know that location on the island. Wendy Ann Mitchell was one of two people that died on Lundy in the last century related to Seabird research. The other one was Jonathan Sparrow. Felix Gade, in his book My Life on Lundy, recounts the two incidents. I think it was in 1951 that Peter Davis became the Field Society warden. He is a graduate of Leeds University and a very competent ornithologist. In 1952, Wendy Mitchell, aged 20, who lived at Mort Ho, came to Lundy to be the storekeeper. Wendy was a pretty girl with striking red golden hair, and she was ambitious to become a poetess. I was never lucky enough to read any of her verses, but several people of taste who were favoured by Wendy in being allowed to read them told me that they were really good in the modern style. It seemed somehow inevitable that Wendy and Peter should become sweethearts, and seriously so, for Peter proposed and was accepted. They were an idyllic couple, and apart from her duties in the store, Wendy was always with Peter. In July, Peter and his assistant warden, David Smith, were busy ringing young guillemots and razorbills, and one day Wendy came to Mrs. Gade after the shop was shut and asked if she could have a packed lunch because she wanted to go out with Peter on his birding expedition. Wendy set out as happy as a skylark. Two young men members of the Field Society were of the party, and one of them told me afterwards what happened to turn that day of sunshine and happiness into one of deep tragedy. Peter and David were operating in a deep inlet on the west coast, about 20 yards south of Three Quarter Wall, and Wendy, who was sitting on the really steep sideland, almost the brow of the cliff, at a place where vegetation was scarce and where there were loose small granite stones lying on top of the very dry and short wiry grass. Thus the surface was potentially dangerous. The two youths seated themselves lower down, actually on the solid granite, watching Peter and David, who were in the southern face of the inlet. Suddenly there was a wild, fearful, despairing shriek, and Wendy hurtled down, passing the youths closely, to her instant death on the rocks at the foot of the cliff. Peter and David scaled the cliff on their side of the inlet and made their way down to Wendy's body, which was in the sea. They lifted her onto a flattish rock, and soon realised that the young life was extinct. What Peter's feelings were at that moment one can only guess. It was a very sad business. I was told by Wendy's father, who came to Lundy a few days later to collect her belongings, that Wendy had always been nervous of the cliffs. The only explanation that anyone could come to was that Wendy must have been rising to her feet, had slipped on the loose granite and lost her balance, so that she fell on this very steep slope and could not save herself from rolling and falling to the bottom. Mrs. Gade said that she had noticed that Wendy was wearing rope-soled beach shoes, which might have been contributory to the accident. There might have also been a momentary vertigo, which is not uncommon when rising from a sitting or lying posture. It was a tragic accident and cast a gloom over everybody, but naturally Peter Davis felt it the most deeply. Early in 1965, the Field Society appointed as warden a young man named Jonathan Sparrow. He was about 19 years old, a tall, gentle youth from East Yorkshire who was well liked by all. On June the 22nd, he felt he should attempt to ring young razorbills and guillemots. He was not a practiced climber, but he attempted to descend the cliffs south of the old battery on the west coast. He was accompanied by a girl camper, who also was ignorant of cliff climbing, although she fortunately did not attempt the descent of the really difficult cliff. Jonathan had no rope and he was nervous, or so I was told by the girl. He missed his footing and fell the 100 or so feet to the rocks below. The poor girl, almost speechless with fright, came to report the accident, and Tony Walker, a visitor, with Heinz Lederer and another man, descended the cliff at Battery Point, and with much difficulty they brought Jonathan's body to the top. Jonathan's mother, a practicing doctor, was notified, and she wrote a very kind letter in reply, and thanked all those who had recovered the body. So yet another young life had ended uselessly in the pursuit of ringing birds with the idea of tracing their movements. It was already well known in ornithological circles that razorbills, guillemots, puffins and kittiwakes rarely proceeded further across the Atlantic Ocean than 200 miles west of the coasts of Europe, including Britain, but some had been recovered in the Mediterranean, as far south as the Canary Islands and the mainland coasts of West Africa. I had for some years been sceptical of the use of continuing to ring more auks, and this young life, lost so sadly, made me a confirmed opponent of the continuation of the practice. I said earlier there's 18 pairs that nest at this ledge. Only 15 of these pairs regularly raise a chick. I've given each of these pairs a letter to show where they nest on the ledge. On the top row, from left to right, you have two birds on site A, one at site B, one at site C, one at site D, two birds that are preening each other on site E. Behind them is site J. To the right of that is site F, then site G, and then a small gap, and site E. On the bottom row, there's two birds on site M. This is one of the pairs that I've only ever seen raise a chick in 1 year. Next to them, two birds at site N, which are ignoring each other. Then two birds at site O, then site P, Q, R, and S. All of these pairs, with the exception of site M, have got all of these pairs, with the exception of site M, are sitting on eggs at this time, on the 31st of May 2019. Guillemots don't build a nest, but lay their eggs directly onto the ledge. So one member of each pair always has to be there to protect the egg from predators. The other birds can be at the ledge as well, or more often out to sea, either fishing or preening. Here you see the second member of pair G fly in. I label the bird that's sitting on the ledge to start with G1 and the bird that's just flown in G2. The birds perform a greeting ceremony when they arrive, calling to each other. Returning adult will open its bill if it hasn't got a fish, but if it has a small fish in its mouth, its bill will remain closed. These returning birds are a good way to work out the identity of other pairs on the ledge, as sometimes the greeting ceremony of one pair will provoke the other pairs to preen or call to each other. The only way we can identify birds on this ledge is by their behaviour. Other colonies, such as the Isle of May in Scotland and Skomer off the Welsh coast, maybe about 40 or 50 miles away, colouring large numbers of their guillemots, so the guillemots can be identified through a telescope. I'll be posting videos every few days until the 30th of June of the lives of these 18 pairs and their efforts to feed their chicks. The next video will be on the 3rd of June when you'll see the first chick. Enjoy watching the other videos until then, and enjoy BBC Springwatch as well.